Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Kathryn Porritt. Hey, Kathryn.
Hi, Kimberly. How you doing?
Good. I am so happy to have you here. And just so people know who you are, I'm going to read your bio and then we'll get into your
Okay,
story.
great.
So, Kathryn Porritt is an international investor and business strategist based in Australia, serving a global market. Kathryn was the founder of one of Australia's fastest growing and high profile lifestyle e commerce companies. After 9 years, Kathryn sold this company and assisted a large technology company to prepare for sale, which sold for 75 million. Kathryn soon began a new venture at another global technology company. Within 12 months, with Kathryn's expertise, the company doubled its revenue. Now, as the founder of Iconic Influencers, which is how we met, she assists the world's most elite personal brands with luxury branding, representation services, commercialization strategies, big deal PR, and speaking. She has created icons, iconic empires, and iconic brands you know and love through her work. Kathryn is a sought after speaker and media commentator on luxury business, personal brands, marketing, and iconic businesses. She's been listed twice in the BRW Fast 100 fastest growing companies, won a Smart50 Award for influential entrepreneurs, and the Wicked Women Award for influential women in the technology space. So you've done a lot in your short life.
That sounds interesting. I'd love to meet that person.
Yes,
That's
yes.
amazing. It's really funny hearing that back. Kimberly, thank you for that. That's amazing.
So, yeah, just tell us about you and how you started in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's a lot more personal than that just sounded, of course. And so, look, I grew up in a, you can hear I've got an Australian accent. I grew up in a tiny little town in Australia, just outside of Byron Bay, which some of you might know as the hometown of people like Chris Hemsworth, etc. So it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. Lucky enough to grow up there. And then I couldn't wait to get out though and get out into the big wide world and the city. And so I studied journalism, didn't practice journalism for even a minute. But I'm so glad that I did because it set me up for success with my comms and interviewing and, video skills and those sorts of things, which really did set me up for success along the way. Look, my first part of my career was very boring. I was running shopping centres and communities and marketing and sales in what you would call in the States malls. And I moved around and around and I enjoyed it, but it certainly wasn't where I wanted to be. And that's where I met my husband when I moved to Canberra, who is a career diplomat with the Australian government. And he's quite risk averse, but I knew that I wanted to run my own business. I come from a family of people who run their own businesses. And so I always knew in my bones that's what I wanted to do. But I had to find the right time and place to do it. And thankfully, that came with my first baby, Penny, who's now just about to turn 20. And so my deal with my husband was I'd give it a crack for the 12 months that I was on maternity leave and to see if it stuck. And as we just talked about with the bio, that turned into one of the largest lifestyle companies in Australia. And I didn't know what I was doing, Kimberly. I had no idea. Thankfully, I had all of the guts and the bravery of, a 20 and 30-year-old just making mistakes and taking risks. And it turned out to be a lot of fun. 9.5 years into that, I remember very distinctly standing on the warehouse floor of that company, thinking that my time was over there and I'd done what I needed to do and the fun had sort of gone out of it. And so my two kids had grown up in the company and we'd had a great time. We'd run it from overseas and on all sorts of things. So it was a lot of fun. So we were lucky enough to go through an exit, and as you also said, I went on and to help another couple of friends with a similar sort of thing. But what now is driving me, which I think is really the guts of the conversation, is that I realized that instead of sitting on the beach drinking Mai Tais, I am driven by work. I do know that there's impact that I want to have. And so through absolute choice, I made a decision to create a company out of joy. And what that joy meant to me, and I know this is something that you're really passionate about, um, what I absolutely knew was my joy is that I wanted to be, I know I'm a great communicator. I know that I really can find commercial possibilities for people. And so putting those two things together, I started what was at the time called Business Bravery, is now called Iconic Empire. We've rebranded. But the idea was to back great people like yourself who just are absolute masters at what they do and help them to level up their offers and level up their messaging so that they can package things at the highest level and then build what we call the iconic empire around their brand, which is where I get my joy from, helping. I've still got that real competitive streak.
Mhm.
And so what I love doing with my clients is just helping them see possibilities they didn't see for themselves and then actually helping them bring that to life, which is what we call the iconic empire. So it's all been about chasing joy over the last almost 10 years. And boy, oh boy, have I had a great time on the way.
Yeah, and it seems like you are always having a great time,
I
and
am. I
yes.
am.
And you do something, really unique compared to a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there doing branding, doing
Mhm,
PR, but the way you do things is so unique and it's about positioning. I mean, really positioning.
mhm.
So, do you want
Yeah.
to talk about that?
Yeah, I would love to. I think what's really interesting to me, having had a business at the sort of lower end of the market in terms of like volume and scale, and then deliberately deciding that I wanted to do something at the very highest end and work with very few people, but work very deeply with them. I didn't realize what I was doing there was so unique in the personal brand space because while there are luxury brands in the world, when you think about luxury brands, you think of Chanel or, Rolex or Bugatti or, whatever that might be. They're usually product brands, not service-based brands, or certainly not personal brands. And so what I'd done without really thinking it through, not strategically when I first started out, or certainly for my own business in the first instance, was creating a business purely out of joy that is at the very highest end of the market versus looking at the market for what everyone else is doing and finding a gap, or listening to your audience and then recreating what the audience wants you to create. What I've done here is taken, I certainly didn't make it up, but really learnt from luxury brands how they market, how they position, and how they sell. That is so different to the mainstream, even premium end of the market, but certainly that volume and scale end of the market, and then apply that to personal brands. And we've been ridiculously successful in applying that. So that's really where we've done things really differently. We've been a real market leader in that space and we continue to innovate. I mean, the more people I work with, the more verticals we're in, the more locations we're backing, the more extraordinary experts that I'm learning from across wealth and health and, you know, any sort of space. So business, we're backing people, interior designers, wedding planners. As I work with the surgeons, as I work with people who are in all these different areas, we're just getting better and better and better at optimizing the way that we do things and bringing that to market for them.
Mhm. I know when we think of luxury as far as products, we think of
Yeah.
scarcity, exclusivity,
Yeah.
difficult to get to, high, barrier for entry.
Mhm.
So, how do we take what someone has done for 20 years or more, where they're an expert, and
Mhm.
actually put them on that platform where they're seen as premium?
Yeah, such a great question. And it's the crux of really what I do. And it's not difficult to understand the theory behind it, but actually what is difficult is the identity work that goes along with this. So bear with me on the theory for a second and let's just focus on that. The theory is really simple, and it is, as you rightly say, when you work at the highest end of the market, you want to be positioned as the one and only choice. You want to be in a position of absolute rarity, and you want to naturally be working only with a very select group of people because that builds in that scarcity, the urgency, and that rarity without you needing all of the bells and whistles that people have to create to, at that lower end where they've got, deadline funnels and you're throwing in the steak knives with this and these guarantees and blah, 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 all the things that mainstream brands do to create urgency and scarcity. We do that naturally at the higher end of the market when you position yourself as only having a select group of people that you work with and only working at the very deepest and richest, level of expertise with those people. Now, that all sounds quite easy to do, but what's difficult about it is there's a real up-leveling that needs to happen if you want to own that space. You have to be absolutely certain about your ability to deliver at that level. And not only that, because I think most masters can get really certain about what it is that they're putting into the market. Where it gets difficult or where we've got to do some work on that identity piece is this stepping into a true, what we call extreme pioneering part of your brand. Because when you think about all of those luxury brands, they're the ones that everyone else is copying behind them, and they have to, part of the brand is this constant growth cycle. They're constantly innovating, they're constantly growing, they're constantly needing to create and innovate. That's a pretty difficult position to put yourself in, and it's one where you can't ask the market what they want. You've got to learn to trust yourself, and then you've got to just go for it and know that you're going to make mistakes, you're going to be growing, you're going to be putting yourself out there at the very pointy end of the market. Not only that, not only is there that supreme risk taking that comes along with that, you've also got to accept that all of those people behind you are going to be copying you. So you've got to keep growing and keep growing and keep growing. It's like I often give the example, it's a pretty easy one to understand, particularly for those of us who like a bit of fashion. If you think about Chanel, any of the brands at the front end of the market, they're constantly innovating and they're bringing out, the season's next styles and trends. 5 minutes later, Zara's copied it and it's in all of the Zara brands around the world with their fast fashion. And even more so than that, you've got your Temus and your Sheins and those guys that are then recreating all of that and then dumping that into the market at the volume end. So if you just think about that for your own brand, what that means is, you've got to kind of step into this identity where you are the market leader, you're the market extreme pioneer, you're putting yourself out there. Sometimes it's going to land, sometimes it isn't, but you are constantly needing to grow and you've got to accept that other brands around you are just going to be funnel hacking the heck out of you. They're going to be copying what you're doing, all of those things. And so you've got to, just as you've got something is working and it's rare and it's amazing and it's dropping into the market, now we've got to keep going, next edge, next edge, next edge. And for a certain number of extraordinary experts in the world, that is the most joyful, exciting way to run a business is not listening to the market, but instead trusting yourself. So once you can step into that identity, it feels flipping awesome.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It sounds exciting to me too. The
Yeah.
profession I'm in, behavioral optometry, people would
Hmm.
come in and I didn't know what to do with them because
Yeah.
they had problems that no one could solve, and I would just have to create something on the spot, and
Mm.
that's exciting, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So if you're driven like that, that's what makes you one of my most ideal people to work with because if you're driven by that and that's exciting to you, then you're going to spend the rest of your life deepening that mastery. And
Mm,
that puts you in an elevated position where you really are doing something that is extremely rare.
yes.
Yeah.
And I had a question about marketing. So you
Mhm.
have this exclusive offer, this exclusive service.
Yeah.
And typically people would start out, it's very common to have this low ticket $27 offer, and then you go to the $4.99, and then you go to the 1,500, and then
Uh,
you know, and it's not the same. So if you're at that exclusive provider of service, how do you actually reach your people, let them know that the service is available, but still stay exclusive?
Yeah, another great question. So you're absolutely right. So a mainstream business would start at the bottom and move its way up, which is that ascending model. You put a whole heap of stuff into the market, and then slowly but surely people kind of fall out of it that end up being your proper buyers, or the buyers that you really want to work with. So we do things the complete opposite. And you're right to call that out. We work on a descending model, which means that what we want to do with our clients first up is we want to focus at the top end of the market and identify the people that they most want to work with their most rare and exclusive offer. Then from there, once we've got that working, then we can start to get scale, right? So, we've got ads with a $47 product. We've got some courses and things. But what we've done is we've used the work that we've done that at the luxury end of the market to then scale it down. And so that, makes most sense. If you're baffled by this idea of, or you love the idea of scale and passive income and thinking that if I'm at this end of the market, I can't do it. Again, use Chanel as an example. You've got the couture, then you've got the ready to wear, and then right at the very bottom, you've got licensed products like your perfumes or your lipsticks or what have you. So you can definitely do it as a luxury brand. To take your point about how, okay, that's great. That sounds great in theory, Kathryn, but how do you actually do that and reach these people? What we do is hyper targeting, is the terminology that we use. And it's really, really dead simple, Kimberley. It's just hard to execute because it takes time and energy and patience to do. But the actual theory is very, very simple. You go back to when my dad graduated from university, we didn't have Meta ads, we didn't have Google ads, we didn't have YouTube and, TikTok and all sorts of these platforms, which has actually made us very lazy as marketers because we're putting stuff out there. You can throw some dollars behind it, throw it into a funnel, and then, like we were saying, ascending your way up that funnel. That's made us really lazy, right? We're sitting around waiting for someone to land in our lap to convert. Go back again to when my dad graduated university. The reason I use dad as a great example is he graduated university and then couldn't get the job that he wanted. And so he ended up selling sellotape on the road to newsagents, right? And so he literally did what we now teach, which is real classic marketing. That first job that he had out of university, he would pick and choose the newsagents that he wanted to sell the sellotape to. He would create a relationship with them and then he'd land on their doorstep and he would sell to them. Now, I'm definitely not advocating that same old, just land on someone's doorstep and do door-to-door selling. But what I am advocating and what hyper targeting is we literally at this end of the market pick and choose who we want to work with. We go and research them and then we deliberately create a connection with them. And there's all sorts of ways that we can do that. As you pointed out, we have an agency where we can create those connections for you, and we've got the PR smarts to be able to put you in the right room, on the right podcast, on the right stage, in front of the right person, or invite someone into your podcast or your stage, whatever it might be. We can create that connection for you using our smarts. The alternative is you literally can go and do this yourself by researching those people and then moving your way into, they're becoming a warm connection with them and being known and trusted. And look, over time, the intention is that your brand matches that and you become known in the market as the only one, the most dominant, only person in that space who's positioned at that highest end of the market. And people know in that higher end of the market, the billionaires, the people who are spending at that end of the market, they all know. They buy by referral. They buy by being invited to something by someone that they know, like, and trust. It's a different way of buying. They're not going through your webinar or downloading your lead magnet. It's a completely different way of buying. So, but it is intentional marketing, which is exactly what you're talking about here. So just flip it and go back to the way that we used to do things in the good old days. And that actually works.
And that makes so much sense to me. I know, like in my profession, there were times when I was invited to trainings with a master, and there was
Mm,
8 or 10 of us there.
right.
Nobody else knew about it. If you didn't
Yeah.
know the right people, you weren't invited. Um,
Yeah.
and the same thing happens with a lot of things that once that correct market, the market that you want, 2 or 3 people know about you and you give them service that makes them happy and they
Yeah.
want to refer other people, then that snowballs.
It absolutely does. It's such a simple way of doing business, and it's in full integrity for someone who has just this deep level of mastery. So it will feel amazing. There's no smoke and mirrors to it. There's none of the pretending and, you know, adding all the faff that the mainstream does. It just is a really nice way to create a connection with someone and then do business for the future. And it's actually very easy once you get started. And as you say, once you've got a few of these clients, it's actually really easy to continue with that momentum into the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I had a question about just the appearance as a luxury service or brand. So
Mm.
you always look beautiful and you have just this put together look. And I think of myself and I can do something that's luxury, but
Mhm.
I'm very much a down to earth person. If
Mm.
I'm not on a podcast, I'm not really wearing makeup. So,
Yeah.
how do we need to show up to be a luxury brand? Do we always have to walk around with our stilettos on, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's such a fundamentally great question. And I get asked this all the time. Look, I'm doing me. This is who I am. And it took me a really long time to be all in on Kathryn. So I spent most of my life, as a lot of us do, trying to fit into someone else's interpretation of what I should be. And so for a really long time, I thought, well, if I'm intelligent and capable and ambitious and all of those nice things, well, then I also can't be really feminine. And so I was that person who walked around in, the black suits and those sorts of things. I was fine, but it was never me. And so when I started this business, I went, I'm going all in on me, and you can like me or not like me. And what's been really interesting, the only thing that I was worried about, because I love the sparkles. You can see I've got flowers everywhere. Like my whole brand is so feminine, it's ridiculous. But what I was worried about at the time was, so I love working with men and women. I didn't want to be in a position where I was gender specific, and I was worried that I might be unattractive for men to work with me. They might think that I just really specialize in working with women if I'm over the top feminine. But what I've absolutely proven time and time again is just because I'm all in authentically me and the best of me at all times, and I'm never not me. Like you'll see me on a Sunday, I look exactly the same at my son's, soccer game on Sunday as I do sitting here talking to you today on this podcast. I'm just all in authentically me. And that's what people buy into. We call branding create your magical world. And a magical world, I mean, this is my magical world, and I'm very clear with everyone who works with me that your magical world is all about whoever you are and then bringing that to life in a way that you just walk in and you just go, oh my God, I'm in my joy today. So whatever that means to you. I worked with, one of the most authentic, amazing people ever was someone who used to complete antithesis of me. He would wear ripped jeans every day. He'd wear a t-shirt that always had a funny saying on it. He would never wear the same one, it was a different one every single day. And that was his fun, right? Was going out and finding all these fun t-shirts. And then he would wear yellow sneakers. So different pair of yellow sneakers, like super, super fun. But he would have the Adidas ones, he'd have the Nike ones, he'd have the new ones from Gucci, etc. As long as they were yellow sneakers, he had it on. And then he had this kind of crazy professor hair. But that was him, and he was all in on that brand, and it really resonated, and he owned the market that he was in. So what I'm saying to you is it could be anything as long as you are all in on you. That's what people buy. And branding does matter because people do trust you if you are authentically you and there's no mismatch between, just found you on social media, you look like this, and then over here you look like that, and then over here you look like this other thing. Like, what's going on? That's consistent and it's all in and it's kind of magic and it's got this energy about it that just feels extraordinary. You you're halfway there in building trust with someone.
All right, thank you. Well, if people wanted to connect with you, find out more about your services, how do they do that, and what services do you have available right now?
Oh, you're so lovely to ask that. So, my main website is over at iconicempire.com. So, you can find us there. You can also find, I've got my own website at kathrynporritt.com. The other thing that I would love your audience to know is that we host what we call the red carpet experience. And I would more than love to offer your audience an opportunity to come along to one of our red carpet experiences as my guest. So we'll furnish you with a link for that so that you can come along and feel what it's like inside the icons world and what it feels like to be selling at this level. And if that feels really exciting to you, then we've got all sorts of resources that we can put in front of you from there.
Right, well, thank you. So now I have a personal question.
Okay.
What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Ah, that's such an easy question to answer right now. I don't think I would have had an easy answer for you last year, but long story short, my husband came back from a trip that we took together with the kids. We go away every December together, and he came back from our European trip this year really unwell, and he's fine now. Just to kind of end that, he's really good now, but at the time, it really made me make some really big decisions about what I wanted to do I could work until I lose myself in flow and work all the time. So I made some really big choices this year about what I was going to say no to in order to say yes to the right things. And again, I know you're a really big advocate of a lot of that type of work. Um, for me, it is spending more time with my family and traveling as much as I can. So, love travel. We've been lucky enough to live in all sorts of lovely places and experience great things. And I just want to do more of that. And I'm really lucky that my kids at almost 20 and almost 18 actually want to hang out with us and be with us. So just traveling with them and just really getting to know them and backing them on their journey is going to be the funnest possible thing. I'm turning 50 this year and it just feels like the greatest gift ever to be, ready to kind of tackle this next stage of my life.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for all your knowledge and wisdom around being iconic.
Thank you so much for having me. You are just such an incredible personal brand, and I love the work that you do. It really is iconic. So thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yes. So I have one last question. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
I'm going to use a word that's loaded, um, but I do mean it in the nicest possible way. Be selfish. Be really flippin' selfish and be really honest with yourself about what you want and go chase that. There's so many people that I meet that have spent decades doing things that they've been told that they ought to do or they should do, and they're miserable or they're bored. All of those things. Just stop it. Be really, really flippin' selfish and be truthful with yourself about what you want. There's always a how. Just go chase it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Catherine.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We'll talk to you again soon.